hiding place when he began wondering what was happening in Camelin. Osmodian would be the man he was until he died and was reborn, and perhaps even after. Under my eyes, Rand said quietly, and if I even suspect that where that whisker falls might displease me, I put my trust in the Lord Dragon's mercy, Osmodian murmured, bowing. With the Lord Dragon's permission, I will wait outside. Rand glanced around the room as the man departed, backing away, still half-bowed. His sword lay on the gilt-lined chest at the foot of the bed, dragon-buckled sword belt wrapped around the scabbard, and the Seanchan spearhead. The killing today would not be with steel, not on his part. He touched his pocket, felt the hard carved shape of the fat little man with his sword. That was the only sword he needed today. For a moment he considered skimming to Tyr to take back Kalandor, or even to Rhuidean for what was hidden there. He could destroy Ravin with either before the man knew he was there. He could destroy Camelin itself with either. But could he trust himself? So much power. So much of the one power. saidin hung there just out of sight. The taint seemed part of him. Rage oozed just beneath the surface. At Ravin, at himself. If it broke loose, and he held even Kalandor, what would he do? He would be invincible. With the other, he could skim to Shale Ghul itself, put an end to it all. End it now one way or another. One way or another. No. He was not in this alone. He could not afford anything but victory. The world rides on my shoulders, he murmured. Suddenly he yelped and clapped a hand to his left buttock. It felt as though a needle had stabbed him, but he did not need the goosebumps fading on his arms to tell him what had happened. What was that for? He growled at Aviendha. Just to see whether the Lord Dragon was still made of flesh, like the rest of us mortals. I am, he said flatly, and seized saidin. All the sweetness, all the filth, just long enough to channel briefly. Her eyes widened, but she did not flinch, only looked at him as if nothing had occurred at all. Still, as they crossed the anteroom, she rubbed furtively at her bottom when she thought he was looking the other way. It seemed she was of ordinary flesh, too. Pardon me, I thought I'd taught her a few manners. Pulling open the door, he stepped out and stood staring. Mat was leaning on his odd spear with that broad-brimmed hat pulled low, a little apart from Osmodian, but that was not what took him aback. There were no maidens. He should have known something was wrong when Osmodian came in unannounced. Aviendha was looking around in amazement, as if she expected to find them behind one of the tapestries. Melindra tried to kill me last night, Mat said, and Rand stopped thinking about maidens. One minute we were talking, the next she was trying to kick my head off.
Hey, Christopher.
Mat told the story in short sentences.
Yeah, my GoPro went dead.
His conclusions. He closed his eyes when he told how he had ended it. A simple, stark, I killed her, and opened them again quickly, as if he saw something behind his eyelids he did not care to see. I'm sorry you had to do that, Rand said quietly, and Mat gave a bleak shrug. Better her than me, I suppose. She was a dark friend. He did not sound as if it made much difference. I will settle with Samael, just as soon as I'm ready. And how many will that leave? The Forsaken are not here, Aviendha snapped, and neither are the Maidens of the Spear. Where are they? What have you done, Rand al'Thor? Me? There were 20 right here when I came to bed last night, and I haven't seen one since. Perhaps it is because Mat Asmodean began, and stopped when Matt looked at him, a tight-mouthed blend of pain and readiness to hit something. "Do not be fools," Aviendha said in a firm voice. "Father Ismai would not claim tow against Matt Cawthon for this. She tried to kill him, and he killed her. Even her near sisters would not, if she had had any. And no one would claim tow against Randall Thor for what another did, unless he ordered it done. You have done something, Randall Thor. Something great and dark, or they would be here." "I have done nothing," he told her sharply, "and I don't intend to stand here discussing it. Are you dressed for the ride south, Matt?" Matt shoved a hand into his coat pocket, fingering something. He usually kept his dice and dice cup in there. "Camelin. I'm tired of them sneaking up on me. I want to sneak up on one of them for a change. I just hope I get the bloody pat on the head instead of the bloody flower," he added with a grimace. Rand did not ask him what he meant. Another ta'veren. Two together to twist chance, perhaps. No way to tell how, or even if. But it seems like we'll be together a little longer. Matt looked more resigned than anything else. Before they had gone far down the tapestry-lined corridor, Moraine and Egwene met them, gliding along together as if the day held no more ahead than a walk in one of the gardens. Egwene, cool-eyed and calm, golden great serpent on her finger, really could have been an Aes Sedai despite her Aiel clothes and shawl and the folded scarf around her temples, while Moraine... Gold threads caught the light, faintly streaking Moraine's gown of shimmering blue silk. The small blue stone on her forehead, hanging from its gold chain fastened in her waves of dark hair, shone as brightly as the large gold-set sapphires around her neck. Hardly suitable garb for what they intended, yet in his red coat, Rand could not comment. Perhaps it was being here, where House Damodred had once held the Sun Throne, but Moraine's graceful carriage was more regal than he remembered ever seeing it. Not even the presence of Jason Tail could spoil that queenly serenity with surprise, but amazingly she gave Matt a warm smile. "So you are going too, Matt. Learn to trust the pattern. Do not waste your life attempting to change what cannot be changed." From Matt's face, he might have been considering changing his mind about being there at all, but the Aes Sedai turned from him without a trace of worry. "These are for you, Rand." "More letters," he said. One bore his name in an elegant hand that he recognized immediately. "From you, Moraine." The other carried Tom Maryland's name. Both had been sealed with blue wax, apparently with her great serpent ring, impressed with the image of the snake biting its own tail. "Why write me a letter? And sealed? You've never been afraid to say whatever you wanted to say to my face. If I ever forgot it, Aviendha has been reminding me that I'm only flesh and blood. You have changed from the boy I first saw outside the Wine Spring Inn." Her voice was a soft silver chiming. "You are hardly the same at all. I pray you have changed enough." Egwene murmured something low. Rand thought it was, "I pray you have not changed too much." She was frowning at the letters as if she too wondered what was in them. So was Aviendha. Moraine went on more brightly, even briskly. "Seals ensure privacy. That contains things I wish you to think on, not now, when you have time for thinking. As for Tom's letter, I know no safer hands than yours in which to place it. Give it to him when you see him again. Now, there is something you must see at the docks." "The docks?" Rand said. "Moraine, this morning of all mornings, I've no time for..." But she was already moving down the corridor, as if sure he would follow. "I've had horses readied. Even one for you, Matt, just in case." Egwene hesitated only a moment, then followed. Rand opened his mouth to call Moraine back. She had sworn to obey. Whatever she had to show him, he could see it another day. What could an hour hurt? Matt muttered. Perhaps he was reconsidering. It would not be amiss for you to be seen this morning, Asmodean said. Ravin might just know of it as soon as it happens. If he has any suspicions, if he has any spies who may have listened at keyholes, it might allay them for today. Rand looked at Avienda. Do you also counsel delay? I counsel that you listen to Moraine Sedai. Only fools ignore Aes Sedai. What could be at the docks more important than Ravin? He growled, then shook his head. There was a saying in the Two Rivers, not that anybody said it where women could hear. The Creator made women to please the eye and trouble the mind. Aes Sedai was certainly no different in one respect. 1 hour. The sun was not yet high enough to lift the city's walls' long shadow from the stone quay where Kadir's wagons were lined up, but he still mopped his face with a large handkerchief. It was only partly the heat that made him sweat. Great gray curtain walls stretching into the river at either end of the row of docks made the quay seem a dim box with him caught in it. There was nothing but broad, round-bowed grain barges docked here, and the same anchored in the river, waiting their turn to unload. He had considered slipping onto one when it cast off, but it meant abandoning most of what he still possessed. Yet, had he thought the slow passage downriver would take him anywhere except to his death, he would have. Lanfear had not returned to his dreams, but he had the burns on his chest to remind him of her commands. Just the thought of disobeying one of the Chosen made him shiver, even with sweat rolling down his face. If only he knew who to trust, to the extent it was possible to trust any of his fellow dark friends. The last of his drivers, who had sworn the oaths, had vanished 2 days ago, very likely on one of the grain barges. He still did not know which Aiel woman had slipped that note under his wagon door. You are not alone among strangers. A way has been chosen. Though he had several possibilities in mind. The docks held almost as many Aiel as they did workmen, come to stare at the river. He had seen a few of those faces, more often than seemed reasonable, and some had looked at him consideringly. A few Cairhienin had as well, and a Tyran lord. That meant nothing by itself, of course, but if he could find a few men to work with. A mounted party appeared in one of the gateways, Moraine and Randolph Thor leading the way with the Aes Sedai's warder as they threaded through the carts hauling grain sacks away. A wave of cheers rode with them. All glory to the Lord Dragon, and hail the Lord Dragon, and now and again, glory to Lord Matrim, glory to the Red Hand. For once, the Aes Sedai turned down toward the tail end of the line of wagons without so much as a glance at Kadir. He was just as glad, even if she had not been Aes Sedai, even if she had not looked at him as if she knew every black corner of his mind. He would as soon not have looked too closely at some of the things she had filled his wagons with. Yesterday evening, she had made him strip the canvas off that oddly twisted redstone door frame in the wagon just behind his. She seemed to take a perverse delight in making him help her himself with whatever she wanted to study. He would have covered the thing up again if he could bear to go near it, or could make any of his drivers do so. None with him now had seen Herod fall half through it in Ridian and half disappear. Herod had been the first to run away once they cleared the Jangai. The man had not been entirely right in his head after the warder hauled him back. But they could look at it, see the way the corners did not meet properly, how you could not follow it around with your eyes without blinking and growing dizzy. Kadir ignored the first 3 riders as much as the Aes Sedai had ignored him. And Matt Cawthon almost as much. The man was wearing his hat. He had never been able to find a replacement. The Aiel wench, Avienda, rode up behind the young Aes Sedai's saddle, both with their skirts pushed up to show their legs. If he needed any confirmation that the Aiel woman was betting Althor, he only had to see the way she looked at him. A woman who had taken a man to her bed always looked at him with that light of ownership in her eyes after. More importantly, Natael was with them. This was the first time Kadir had been this close to him since crossing the spine of the wall. Natael, who stood high in the Dark Friends. If he could get past the maidens to reach Natael. Suddenly Kadir blinked. Where were the maidens? Althor always had an escort of spear-wielding women. Frowning, he realized he could not see a single maiden among the Aiel on the quay or the docks. Aren't you going to look at an old friend, Hadnan? That melodious voice jerked Kadir around, gaping at a hatchet-nosed face, dark eyes almost hidden by rolls of fat. Kylie? It was impossible. No one survived alone in the waste except Aiel. She had to be dead. But there she stood, white silk straining over her bulk, ivory combs standing tall in her dark curls. A faint smile on her lips, she turned with a grace that still surprised him in a woman so large, and lightly climbed the steps into his wagon. For a moment he hesitated, then hurried after her. He would as soon Kylie Shaogi really had died in the waste. The woman was bossy and obnoxious. She need not think she was getting a penny of the little he had managed to salvage. But she stood as high as Jason Natael. Perhaps she would answer a few questions. At the least, he would have someone to work with. At the worst, someone to put blame on. Power went with standing high, but so did blame for the failures of those beneath you. More than once he had fed his superiors to those still higher up in order to cover himself. Carefully closing the door, he turned, and would have screamed if his throat had not clenched too tight for sound. The woman who stood there wore white silk, but she was not fat. She was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Eyes like dark, bottomless mountain pools, woven silver belting her narrow waist, silver crescents in her shimmering black hair. Kadir knew that face from his dreams. His knees thudding to the floor, shook breath loose. "Great mistress," he said hoarsely. "How may I serve?" Lanfear might have been looking at an insect, one she might crush beneath her slipper, or might not. "By showing your obedience to my commands. I have been too busy to watch Rand al'Thor myself. Tell me what he has done, aside from conquering Carian. What he plans to do." "It is difficult, great mistress. One such as myself cannot come close to such as he." An insect, those cool eyes said, allowed to live so long as it was useful. Kadir racked his brain for everything he had seen or heard or imagined. "He is sending Aiel south in huge numbers, great mistress, though I do not know why. The Tyrans and Carianan do not seem to notice, but I don't think they can tell one Aiel from another. Neither could he. He would not dare lie to her, but if she thought he had more use than he did, a house with no survivors." At first, there was no way to tell whether she liked what she was hearing. But as he went on, her face began to darken. "What is it you want me to see, Moraine?" Rand said impatiently, tying Jadin's reins to one wheel of the last wagon in line. She was standing on tiptoe to peer over the side of the wagon bed at a pair of casks that seemed familiar. Unless he was mistaken, they held the two Cuendillar seals, packed in wool for protection now that they were no longer unbreakable. He felt the Dark One's taint strongly here. It almost seemed to come from the casks, a faint miasma as from something rotting in a hidden place. "It will be safe here," Moraine murmured. Lifting her skirts gracefully, she started up the line of wagons. Lan heeled her, a half-tame wolf, the cloak hanging down his back, all disturbing ripples of color and nothingness. Rand glared. Did she tell you what it was, Egwene? Just that you had to see something. That you had to come here anyway. You must trust Aes Sedai, Aviendha said, almost as levelly, but with a hint of doubt. Mat snorted. Well, I mean to find out now. Natail, go tell Bail I'll be with him in... At the other end of the line, the side of Kadir's wagon exploded. Splinters scything down Aiel and townsfolk. Rand knew. He did not need goosebumps prickling his skin to know. He raced toward the wagon, after Moraine and Lan. Time seemed to slow, everything happening at once, as if the air were jelly clinging to each moment. Lanfear stepped out into stunned silence except for the moans and screams of the injured. Something limp and pale and red-streaked hanging from her hand, dragging behind her as she walked down invisible steps. Her face was a mask of carved ice. He told me, Lews Therin, she almost screamed, flinging the pale thing into the air. Something caught it, inflated it for a moment into a bloody, transparent statue of Adnan Kadir. His skin removed whole. The figure collapsed and fell as Lanfear's voice rose to a screech. You let another woman touch you! Again! Moments clinging, all happening at once. Before Lanfear reached the stones of the quay, Moraine lifted her skirts higher and began running straight toward her. Quick as she was, Lan was quicker, ignoring her shout of, No, Lan! Sword coming out, long legs carried him ahead of her, color-shifting cloak waving behind as he charged. Suddenly he seemed to run into an invisible stone wall, bounce back, try to stagger forward again. One step, and as if a giant hand had smashed him aside, he flew 10 paces through the air, crashing to the stones. While he was in midair, Moraine jerked forward, feet skidding along the pavement, until she was face to face with Lanfear. It was only for a moment. The Forsaken looked at her as though wondering what could have gotten in her way. Then Moraine was flung to one side so hard she rolled over and over until she disappeared beneath one of the wagons. The quayside was in turmoil. Just moments since Kadir's wagon erupted, yet only the blind could not know the one power was being wielded by the woman in white. Along the docks, axes flashed, cutting ropes, freeing barges as their crews desperately fended the craft toward open water and flight. Bare-chested dockmen and dark-clothed townsfolk struggled to jump aboard. In the other direction, men and women milled and screamed as they fought to pass through the gates into the city. And among them, cotton-sword-clad figures veiled themselves and rushed at Lanfear with spears or knives or bare hands. There could be no doubt she was the source of the attack. No doubt she fought with the power. They ran to dance the spears regardless. Fire rolled over them in waves. Arrows of it pierced those who came on with their clothes in flames. It was not as if Lanfear battled them or even paid them any real mind. She might have been brushing aside gnats or bite-me's. Those who fled burned as long as those who tried to fight.
I'll be right back.
She moved toward Rand as if nothing else existed. Heartbeats only. 3 steps she had taken when Rand seized the male half of the true source. Molten steel and steel-shattering ice. Sweet honey and midden heap. Deep in the void, the fight for survival was distant. The battle before him scarcely less. As Moraine vanished beneath the wagon, he channeled, pulling the heat from Lanfear's fires, sinking it into the river. Flames that a moment before engulfed human forms vanished. In the same instant, he wove the flows again, and a misty gray dome came into being, a long oval enclosing him and Lanfear, and most of the wagons, an almost transparent wall that shut out all not already within. Even as he tied the weave, he was not sure what it was or where it had come from. Some memory of Lews Therin's, perhaps. But Lanfear's fires struck it and stopped. He could see people outside dimly, too many thrashing and flailing. He had taken the flames, not the searing of flesh. That stench still hung in the air. But none would burn now that had not already. Bodies lay inside, too, mounds of charred cloth, some stirring feebly, moaning. She did not care. Her channeled flames winked out. The gnats were dispelled. She never glanced aside. Heartbeats. He was cold in the emptiness of the void, and if he felt sorrow for the dead and dying and scarred, the feeling was so far off it might not have been. He was cold itself, emptiness itself. Only the rage of Saidin filled him. Movement to either side. Aviendha and Egwene, eyes concentrated on Lanfear. He had meant to shut them out from this. They must have raced with him. Mat and Osmodian. Outside, the wall missed the final few wagons. In icy calm, he channeled air to snare Lanfear. Egwene and Aviendha could shield her while he distracted her. Something severed his flows. They snapped back so hard that he grunted. "One of them?" Lanfear snarled. "Which is Aviendha?" Egwene threw her head back and wailed, eyes bulging, the world's agony shrieking from her mouth. "Which?" Aviendha rose on tiptoes, shuddering, howls chasing Egwene's as they climbed higher and higher. The thought was suddenly there in the emptiness. Spirit woven so, with fire and earth. There. Rand felt something being cut, something he could not see, and Egwene collapsed in a motionless heap. Aviendha to hands and knees, head down and swaying. Lanfear staggered, her eyes going from the women to him, dark pools of black fire. "You are mine, Lews Therin. Mine!" "No!" Rand's voice seemed to come to his ears down a mile-long tunnel. Distract her from the girls. He kept moving forward, but did not look back. "I was never yours, Mirren. I will always belong to Ilyena." The void quivered with sorrow and loss, and with desperation as he fought something besides the scouring of Saidin. For a moment, he hung balanced. "I am Rand al'Thor, and Ilyena, ever and always my heart." Balanced on a razor edge. "I am Rand al'Thor." Other thoughts tried to well up, a fountain of them. Of Ilyena, of Mirren, of what he could do to defeat her. He forced them down, even the last. If he came down on the wrong side... "I am Rand al'Thor. Your name is Lanfear, and I'll die before I love one of the Forsaken." Something that might have been anguish crossed her face. Then it was a marble mask once more. "If you are not mine," she said coldly, "then you are dead." Agony in his chest, as if his heart was about to explode. In his head, white-hot nails driving into his brain. Pain so strong that inside the void he wanted to scream. Death was there, and he knew it. Frantically, even in the void frantic, emptiness shimmered, dwindled. He wove fire and spirit and earth, flailing it wildly. His heart was no longer beating. Fingers of dark pain crushing the void. Gray veil falling over his eyes. He felt his weave slice raggedly through hers. The burn of breath in empty lungs, lurch of heart beginning to pump again. He could see again. Silver and black flecks floated between him and a stone-faced Lanfear, still catching her balance from the rebound of her flows. The pain was there in head and chest like wounds, but the void firmed, and bodily pain was remote. Well that it was distant, for he had no time to recover. Forcing himself to move forward, he struck at her with air, a club to knock her senseless. She slashed the weave, and he struck again, each time that she sliced through his last weave. A furious rain of blows she somehow saw and countered, always moving closer. If he could keep her occupied for a moment more, if one of those invisible cudgels landed on her head, if he could get close enough to strike her with his fist. Unconscious, she would be as helpless as anyone else. Suddenly, she seemed to realize what he was doing. Still blocking his blows as easily as if she could see every one, hit the wagon behind her, and she smiled like winter's heart. "You will die slowly, and beg me to let you love me before you die," she said. It was not at him directly that she struck this time. It was at his link to Saidin. Panic rang the void like a gong at the first knife-sharp touch, the power diminishing as it slid deeper between him and the source. With spirit and fire and earth, he cut at the knife blade. He knew where to find it. He knew where his link was, could feel that first nick. Her attempted shield vanished, reappeared, returned as fast as he could cut it, but always with that momentary ebbing of Saidin, moments when it almost failed, leaving his counterstroke barely enough to foil her attack. Handling 2 weaves at once should have been easy. He could handle 10 or more. But not when one was a desperate defense against something he could not know was there until it was almost too late. Not when another man's thoughts kept trying to surface inside the void, trying to tell him how to defeat her. If he listened, it might be Luz Theron Telamon who walked away, with Randall Thor a voice sometimes floating in his head, if that. "I'll make both of those trolls watch you beg," Lanfear said. "But should I make them watch you die first, or you them?" When had she climbed into the open wagon bed? He had to watch her, watch for any hint that she was tiring, her concentration slipping. It was a vain hope. Standing beside the twisted door-frame Tirangriel, she looked down at him, a queen about to pass sentence. Yet she could spare time for chill smiles at a dark ivory bracelet that she turned over and over in her fingers. "Which will hurt you the most, Luz Theron? I want you to hurt. I want you to know pain such as no man has ever known." The thicker the flow to him from the source, the harder it would be to cut. His hand tightened on his coat pocket, the fat little stone man with his sword hard against the heron branded into his palm. He drew on Saidin as deeply as he could, till the taint floated in the emptiness with him like misting rain. "Pain, Luz Theron." And there was pain. The world swallowed in agony. Not heart or head this time, but everywhere, every part of him, hot needles stabbing into the void. He almost thought he could hear a quenching hiss at each thrust, and each came deeper than the last. Her attempts to shield him did not slow. They came faster, stronger. He could not believe she was so strong. Clinging to the void, to searing, freezing Saidin, he defended himself wildly. He could end it, finish her. He could call down lightning, or wrap her in the fire she herself had used to kill. Images darted through the pain. A woman in a dark merchant's dress, toppling from her horse, the fire-red sword light in his hands. She had come to kill him, with a fistful of other dark friends. Matt's bleak eyes. "I killed her." A golden-haired woman lying in a ruined hallway where, it seemed, the very walls had melted and flowed. "Ilyena, forgive me!" It was a despairing cry. He could end it, only he could not. He was going to die. Perhaps the world would die. But he could not make himself kill another woman. Somehow it seemed the richest joke the world had ever seen.
Wiping the blood from her mouth, Moiraine crawled out from beneath the tail of the wagon and rose unsteadily to her feet, the sound of a man's laughter in her ears. In spite of herself, her eyes darted, searching for Lan, found him lying almost against the foggy gray wall of the dome that stretched overhead. He twitched, perhaps trying to find strength to rise, perhaps dying. She forced him out of her mind. He had saved her life so many times that by rights it should have belonged to him, but she had long since done what she could to see that he survived his lone war with the Shadow. Now he must live or die without her. It was Rand laughing, on his knees on the stones of the quay, laughing with tears streaming down a face twisted like a man being put to the question. Moiraine felt a chill. If the madness had him, it was beyond her. She could only do what she could do, what she must do. The sight of Lanfear hit her like a blow. Not surprise, but the shock of seeing what had been in her dreams so often since Roydion. Lanfear standing on the wagon bed, blazing bright as the sun with Saidar, framed by the twisted red stone ter'angreal as she stared down at Rand, a pitiless smile on her lips. She was turning a bracelet in her hands. An Angreal. Unless Rand had his own Angreal, she should be able to crush him with that. Either he did, or Lanfear was toying with him. It did not matter. Moiraine did not like that circle of carved, age-dark ivory. At first glance, it seemed to be an acrobat, bending backwards to grip his ankles. Only a closer look would show that his wrists and ankles were bound together. She did not like it, but she had brought it out of Roydion. Yesterday she had taken the bracelet from a sack of odds and ends and left it lying there at the foot of the doorframe. Moiraine was slight, a small woman. Her weight did not disturb the wagon at all as she pulled herself up. She winced as her dress caught on a splinter and tore, but Lanfear did not look around. The woman had dealt with every threat except Rand. He was the only corner of the world she acknowledged in the least right then. Suppressing a small bubble of hope, she could not allow herself that luxury. Moiraine balanced upright a moment on the wagon tail, then embraced the true source and leaped at Lanfear. The Forsaken had an instant's warning, enough to turn before Moiraine struck her, clawing the bracelet away. Face to face, they toppled through the doorframe ter'angreal. White light swallowed everything.
Chapter 53. Fading Words. In the depths of a shrinking void, Rand saw Moiraine hurtle seemingly out of nowhere to grapple with Lanfear. The attacks on him ceased as the two women plunged through the doorframe ter'angreal in a flash of white light that did not end. It filled the subtly twisted redstone rectangle as though trying to flood through and striking some invisible barrier. Lightnings arched silver and blue around the ter'angreal, more and more violently. Rasping buzzes crackled through the air. Rand staggered to his feet. The pain was not gone really, but the pressure was, bringing promise that the pain would go. His eyes could not leave the ter'angreal. Moiraine. Her name hung in his head, sliding across the void. Lan lurched by him, fixed on the wagon, leaning as if only by moving forward could he stop from falling. More than standing was beyond Rand for the moment. He channeled, caught the water in flows of air. You can't do anything, Lan. You can't go after her. I know, Lan said hopelessly. Held in mid-step, he did not struggle, only stared at the ter'angreal that had swallowed Moiraine. The light sent me peace, I know. The wagon itself had caught fire now. Rand tried to suppress the flames, but as soon as he drew the heat from one blaze, the lightnings ignited another. The doorframe itself was beginning to smoke, though it was stone. A white, acrid smoke that gathered thickly under the gray dome. Even a whiff burned Rand's nostrils and made him cough. His skin prickled and stung where the smoke brushed.
Hey,
Hastily, he untied the weave
I
of
had
the
to
dome,
start another one.
dispelled it rather than wait for
My
it to dissipate,
GoPro went dead.
and wove around the wagon a tall chimney of air that gleamed like glass to carry the fumes high and away. Only then did he release Lan. He would not have put it past the man to follow Moiraine anyway, if he could have reached the wagon. It was all in flames now. The redstone doorway as well, melting as if it were wax. But for a warder, that might not matter. She is gone. I cannot feel her presence. The words sounded ripped out of Lan's chest. He turned and began walking down the line of wagons without a backward glance. Following the warder with his eyes, Rand saw Aviendha on her knees, holding Egwene. Releasing saidin, he began to run down the quay. Physical pain that had been distant crashed home, but he ran, however awkwardly. Asmodean was there too, looking around as if he expected Lanfear to leap out from behind a wagon or a toppled grain cart. And Mat. squatting with his spear propped across his shoulder, fanning Egwene with his hat. Rand skidded to a halt. Is she? I don't know, Matt said miserably. She still breathes. Aviendha sounded uncertain how long that would continue, but Egwene's eyes fluttered open as Amis and Bear pushed roughly past Rand with Melaine and Soralia. The wise ones knelt clustered around the younger women, murmuring to themselves and each other as they examined Egwene. I feel... Egwene began weakly, and stopped to swallow. Her face was bloodless pale. I... hurt. A tear leaked from one eye. Of course you do, Soralia said briskly. That is what happens when you let yourself be caught in a man's schemes. She cannot go with you, Rand al'Thor. Melaine's sun-haired beauty was openly angry, but she was not looking at him. It could have been anger at him, or anger at what had happened. I will be right as well, Water, with a little rest, Egwene whispered. Bear dampened the cloth from a water skin and laid it across Egwene's forehead. You will be right with a great deal of rest. I fear you will not be meeting Nynaeve and Elaine tonight. You will not go near Tel Aeron Riyadh for some days, until you are stronger again. Do not give me that stubborn look, girl. We will watch your dreams to make sure, if need be. And give your care to Soralia if you so much as think of disobeying. You will not disobey me more than once, Aes Sedai or not, Soralia said, but with a touch of sympathy at odds with her leathery-faced grimness. Frustration was plain in Egwene's face. I, at least, am well enough to do what must be done, Aviendha said. In truth, she looked not much less haggard than Egwene, but she managed a defiant stare at Rand, plainly expecting argument. Her defiance faded somewhat when she realized the four wise ones were looking at her. I am, she muttered. Of course, Rand said hollowly. I am, she insisted. To him. She carefully avoided meeting the wise one's gaze. Lanfear had me a moment less than she did Egwene. That was enough to make the difference between us. I have told to you, Rand al'Thor. I do not think we would have survived many moments more. She was very strong. Her eyes darted down to the burning wagon. Fierce flames had already reduced it to a shapeless, charred pile inside the glassy chimney. The redstone tir'angreal was no longer visible at all. I did not see all that happened. They are... Rand cleared his throat. They are both gone. Lanfear is dead, and so is Moraine. Egwene began to cry, sobs shaking her in Aviendha's clasp. Aviendha put her head down on the other woman's shoulder as if she too might weep. You are a fool, Rand al'Thor, Amis said, standing. That surprisingly youthful face beneath her headscarf and white hair was stone hard. About this and many other things, you are a fool. He turned away from the accusation in her eyes. Moraine was dead. Dead because he could not bring himself to kill one of the Forsaken. He did not know whether he wanted to cry or laugh wildly. If he did either, he did not think he would be able to stop. The dockside that had been emptying when he made the dome was filled again, though few came nearer than where that misty gray wall had stood. Wise ones moved about, aiding the burned, comforting the dying, assisted by white-robed men in the Codensor. Moans and cries stabbed at him. He had not been quick enough. Moraine dead. No healing for even the worst injured. Because I could not. The light helped me, I could not. More Aielmen stood watching him, some only now unveiling. He still did not see one maiden. Not only Aiel were there. Dobrain, bareheaded on a black gelding, did not take his eyes from Rand, and not far off, Talmanis, and Elysion and Derrid sat their horses, watching Matt almost as closely as they did Rand. People lined the top of the great city wall, outlined and cast in shadow by the rising sun, and more along the curtain walls. Two of those shadowed shapes turned away when he looked up, saw each other only 20 paces apart, and seemed to recoil. He would have wagered they were Mylan and Marengil. Lan was back with the horses at the last wagon in the line, stroking Uldib's white nose. Moraine's mare. Rand went to him. "I'm sorry, Lan. If I'd been faster, He exhaled heavily. "I couldn't kill one, so I killed the other. The light burned me blind." If it had, at that moment, he would not have cared. "The wheel weaves." Lan went to Mondarb, busied himself checking the black stallion's saddle girth. "She was a soldier, a warrior in her way as much as I. This could have happened 200 times these past 20 years. She knew it, and so did I. It was a good day to die." His voice was as hard as it had ever been, but those cold blue eyes were red-rimmed. "Still, I'm sorry. I should have..." The man would not be comforted by should-haves, and they dug at Rand's soul. "I hope you can still be my friend, Lan. I value your counsel, and your sword training, and I'll need both in the days to come." "I am your friend, Rand, but I cannot stay." Lan swung up into his saddle. "Moraine did something to me that has not been done in hundreds of years, not since the time when Aes Sedai still sometimes bonded a warder, whether he wanted it or not. She altered my bond, so it passed to another when she died. Now I must find that other, become one of her warders. I am one already. I can feel her faintly, somewhere far to the west, and she can feel me. I must go, Rand. It is part of what Moraine did. She said she would not allow me time to die avenging her." He gripped the reins as if holding Mondarb back, as if holding himself back from digging his spurs in. "If you ever see Nynaeve again, tell her." For an instant, that stone face crumpled in anguish. An instant, then it was granite again. He muttered under his breath, but Rand heard. "A clean wound heals quickest and pains shortest." Aloud, he said, "Tell her I've found someone else. Green Sisters are sometimes as close to their warders as other women are to husbands. In every way. Tell her I've gone to be a Green Sister's lover as well as her sword. These things happen. It has been a long time since I've seen her." "I will tell her whatever you say, Lan, but I don't know that she'll believe me." Lan bent from the saddle to catch Rand's shoulder in a hard grip. Rand remembered calling the man a half-tame wolf, but those eyes made a wolf seem a lapdog. "We are alike in many ways, you and I. There is a darkness in us. Darkness, pain, death. They radiate from us. If ever you love a woman, Rand, leave her and let her find another. It will be the best gift you can give her." Straightening, he raised one hand. "Peace favor your sword. Taishar, Manetheren." The ancient salute. True blood. "Taishar, Malkir." Lan healed Mondarb's flanks, and the stallion leaped forward, scattering Aiel and everyone else from his path, as if to carry the last of the Malkiri wherever he was headed at a gallop the entire way.
I know.
"The last embrace of the mother welcome you home, Lan," Rand muttered, then shivered. That was part of the funeral service in Shinar and elsewhere in the borderlands. They were still watching him, the Aiel, the people atop the walls. The tower would know of today, or a version of it, as soon as a pigeon could fly there. If Robin did have some way of watching as well, all it took was one raven in the city, one rat here along the river. He certainly would not expect anything today. Elida would think him weakened, perhaps more pliable. And Robin? He realized what he was doing and winced. Stop it. For 1 minute at least, stop and mourn. He did not want all those eyes on him. Aiel fell back before him, almost as readily as they had before Mondarb. The dockmaster's slate-roofed hut was a single windowless stone room lined with shelves full of ledgers and scrolls and papers, lit by 2 lamps on a rough table covered with tax seals and customs stamps. Rand slammed the door behind him to shut out eyes. Moraine dead, Egwene injured, and Lan gone. A high price to pay for Lanfear. Mourn, burn you, he growled. She deserved that much. Don't you have any feelings left? But mostly he felt numb. His body hurt, but under it was deadness. Hunching his shoulders, he stuffed his hands into his pockets and felt Moraine's letters. Slowly, he drew them out. Some things he should think on, she had said. Stuffing Tom's back, he broke the seal on the other. The pages were covered thickly with Moraine's elegant script. These words will fade within moments after this leaves your hands. A warning attuned to you. So be careful of it. That you are reading this means that events have fallen out at the docks, as I hoped. He stopped, staring, then read on quickly. Since the first day I reached Rodion, I have known. It need not trouble you how. Some secrets belong to others, and I will not betray them. That a day would come in Cairhien when news would arrive of Morghese. I did not know what that would be. If what we heard is true, the light have mercy on her soul. She was willful and stubborn, with the temper of a lioness at times, but for all that, a true, good, and gracious queen. But each time that news led to the docks on the following day. There were 3 branches from the docks, but if you are reading this, I am gone, and so is Lanfear. Rand's hands tightened on the pages. She had known. Known, and still she brought him here. Hurriedly, he smoothed out the crumpled paper. The other 2 paths were much worse. Down one, Lanfear killed you. Down the other, she carried you away. And when next we saw you, you called yourself Luz Theron Telamon, and were her devoted lover. I hope that Egwene and Aviendha have survived unharmed. You see, I do not know what happens in the world after, except perhaps for one small thing which does not concern you. I could not tell you, for the same reason I could not tell Lan. Even given the choices, I could not be sure which you would pick. Men of the 2 rivers, it seems, retain much of storied Manetheren in them, traits shared with men of the borderlands. It is said that a borderlander will take a dagger's wound to avoid harm to a woman and count it fair trade. I dared not risk that you would place my life above your own, certain that somehow you could sidestep fate. Not a risk, I fear, but a foolish certainty, as today has surely proved. My choice, Moraine, he muttered. It was my choice. A few final points. If Lan has not already gone, tell him that what I did to him, I did for the best. You'll understand one day, and I hope bless me for it. Trust no woman fully who is now Aes Sedai. I do not speak simply of the Black Archer, though you must always be watchful for them. Be as suspicious of Varen as you are of Alviarin. We have made the world dance as we sang for 3,000 years. That is a difficult habit to break, as I have learned while dancing to your song. You must dance free, and even the best intentioned of my sisters may well try to guide your steps as I once did. Please deliver Tom Maryland's letter safely when you meet him again. There is a small matter that I once told him of, which I must make clear for his peace of mind. Lastly, be wary, too, of Master Jason Natale. I cannot approve wholly, but I understand. Perhaps it was the only way. Yet be careful of him. He is the same man now that he always was. Remember that always. May the light illumine and protect you. You will do well. It was signed simply Moraine. She had almost never used her house name. He reread the second last paragraph again closely. Somehow, she had known who Asmodean was. It had to be that. Known that one of the Forsaken was right there in front of her, and never blinked once. She had known why, too, if he read it right. He would have thought in a letter that would go blank when he set it down, she could have come right out and said what she meant. Not just concerning Asmodean. About how she had learned what she had in Rhuidean. Something to do with Wise Ones, or he missed his guess, and as much chance of finding out more from the letter as from them. About Aes Sedai. Was there a reason she mentioned Baron? And why Alviarin instead of Elida? Even about Tom and Lan. For some reason, he did not think she had left a letter for Lan. The warder was not the only one who believed in clean wounds. He almost took Tom's letter out and opened it, but she might have worded it the same way she had his. Aes Sedai and Cairhienin, she had wrapped herself in mystery and manipulation to the end. To the end. That was what he was trying to avoid with all this blather about her keeping secrets. She had known what would happen, and come as bravely as any Aiel. Come to her death knowing it waited. She had died because he could not bring himself to kill Lanfear. He could not kill one woman, so another had died. His eyes fell on the last words. You will do well. They cut like a cold razor. Why do you weep here alone, Randall Thor? I have heard that some wetlanders think it is shame to be seen weeping. He glared at Suan, standing in the doorway. She was fully accoutred, cased bow on her back, quiver at her belt, round hide buckler, and 3 spears in hand. I'm not. There was dampness on his cheeks. He scrubbed it away. It's hot in here. Makes me sweat like a... What do you want? I thought you had all decided to abandon me and go back to the Threefold Land. It is not we who have abandoned you, Randall Thor. Shutting the door behind her, she sat on the floor and laid her buckler and a pair of the spears down. You have abandoned us. In one motion, she put a foot against the last spear between her hands, heaved, and snapped it in 2. What are you doing? She tossed aside the pieces and picked up another spear. I said, what are you doing? The white-haired maiden's face might have given even Lan pause, but Rand bent and seized the spear between her hands. Her soft-booted foot came to rest against his knuckles, not lightly. Will you put us in skirts and make us merry and tend hearth? Or are we to lie beside your fire and lick your hand when you give us a scrap of meat? Her muscles tensed, and the spear broke, scoring his palm with splinters. He snatched his freed hand back with a curse, shaking off droplets of blood. I don't mean any such thing. I thought you understood. She took up the last spear, set her foot, and he channeled, leaving air to hold her as she was. She only stared at him wordlessly. Burn me, you said nothing. So I kept the maidens out of the battle with Couladin. Not everyone fought that day, and you never said a word. Sulin's eyes widened in incredulity.
Okay,
You
okay.
Kept us from the dance of spears? We
Give me a minute,
kept
Mama.
you
Or
from the dance.
voice.
You were like a
I know
girl,
it's late.
newlywed to the spear, ready to rush
Go
out
your
and kill
side.
Couladin, with never
Go.
a thought for the spear you might take from behind. You are the Karakan.
Really?
You
Go
have
to
no
your
right
side.
to risk yourself
Quit
needlessly.
acting like that.
Her voice flattened.
Really, Snoopy?
Now you go to
Get
fight
to
the
your
Forsaken.
You know the right
The
way.
secret is well kept, but I have heard enough from those who lead the other societies. And you
My
want me
dog's
to
getting
keep out of this
impatient
fight as
with me.
well, he said quietly.
Stay
Do not
on
be
your
a
side.
fool,
No,
Randall
no,
Thor.
no.
Any could have danced the spears with Couladin. For you to risk it was the thinking of a child. None among us can face the Shadow Soul save you. Then why? He stopped. He already knew the answer. After that blood-soaked day against Couladin, he had convinced himself they would not mind. He had wanted to believe they would not. Those who go with you have been chosen. The words came like hurled stones. Men from every society. Men. There are no maidens, Randall Thor. Farderai's Mai carries your honor, and you take ours away. He drew a deep breath, fumbling for words. I do not like to see a woman die. I hate it, Sulin. It curdles me up inside. I could not kill a woman if my life hung on it.
My dog's over here
The
being
fingers of Moraine's
a
letter
tad
rustled in his
impatient.
hand. Dead, because he could not kill Lanfear. Not always just
Because he
his
says
own
it's
life.
late. He wants to go to bed.
Sulin,
But
I would rather go against Robin alone than see one of you die. A foolish thing. Everyone needs another to watch her back. So it is Robin. Even Roydan of the Thunderwalkers and Jurol of the Stone Dogs held that back. She glanced at her upraised foot, held against the spear by the same flows that snared her arms. Release me, and we will talk. After a moment's hesitation, he unraveled the weave. He was tense to seize her again if need be, but she only crossed her legs and sat bouncing the spear on her palms. Sometimes I forget you are raised out of our blood, Randall Thor. Listen to me. I am what I am. This is what I am. She hefted the spear. Sulin, listen, Randall Thor. I am the spear. When a lover came between me and the spear, I chose the spear. Some chose the other way. Some decide they have run with the spears long enough, that they want a husband, a child. I have never wanted anything else. No chief would hesitate to send me wherever the dance is hottest. If I died there, my first sisters would mourn me, but not a fingernail more than when our first brother fell. A tree killer who stabbed me to the heart in my sleep would do me more honor than you do. You understand now? I understand, but he did understand. She did not want him to make her something other than what she was. All he had to do was be willing to watch her die. What happens if you break the last spear? If I have no honor in this life, perhaps in another. She said it as if it were just another explanation. It took him a moment to comprehend. All he had to do was be willing to watch her die. You don't leave me any choices, do you? No more than Moraine had. There are always choices, Randall Thor. You have a choice, and I have one. Giotto allows no other. He wanted to snarl at her, to curse Giotto and everyone who followed it. Choose out your maidens, Sulin. I don't know how many I can take, but Father Mai will have as many as any other society. He stalked past her, and her sudden smile. Not relief. Pleasure. Pleasure that she would have the chance to die. He should have left her wrapped up in Saidin, left her to be dealt with somehow when he came back from Camelin. Slamming the door open, he strode out onto the quay and stopped. Inyla headed a line of maidens, each with 3 spears in her hands, a line leading back from the dockmaster's door, vanishing into the nearest of the gates to the city. Some of the Aielmen on the dockside eyed them curiously, but it was obviously something between Father Mai and the Karakarn, and no business of any other society. Amis and 3 or 4 other Aiels, who had once been maidens, were watching more closely. Most of the non-Aiel had gone, except for a few men nervously riding overturned grain carts and trying to look elsewhere. Inyla stepped toward land, then halted and smiled as Sulin came out. Not relief. Pleasure. Smiles of pleasure running back down that long line of maidens. Smiles on those wise ones, too, and a sharp nod for him from Amis, as if he had put an end to some idiotic behavior. I thought maybe they were going to go in one at a time and kiss you out of your miseries, Matt said. Rand frowned at him, standing there leaning on his spear and grinning, wide-brimmed back on his head. How can you be so cheerful? The smell of seared flesh still hung in the air, and the moans of burned men and women being cared for by wise ones. Because I'm alive, Matt snarled. What do you want me to do, cry? He shrugged uncomfortably. Amis says Egwene really will be all right in a few days. He did not look around then, but as though he did not want to see what he saw. Burn me, if we're going to do this thing, let's do it. Sotovia, Sogain. What? I said it's time to roll the dice. Did Sulin stop up your ears? Time to roll the dice, Rand agreed. The flames had died inside the glassy chimney of air, but the white smoke still rose as though flames yet consumed the Tirangriel. Moraine. He should have... Done was done. The maidens were crowding down around Sulin, as many as would fit onto the quay. Done was done, and he had to live with it. Death would be a release from what he had to live with. Let's do it. Chapter 54. To Camelin.
All right, everyone. I'm going to call into this stream for tonight. Excuse me. But I want to thank everyone for stopping by, and everyone continues to stop by. I definitely appreciate all y'all support. Until next time, everyone, y'all stay safe.